All right, so this video is all about the Sigma 300 to 600 f4, and I spent the last 3 weeks all across Arizona pushing this lens to the limit, filming different scenarios of wildlife across the state, and I'm excited to say this lens is a game changer. So stick around to the end of this video. You do not want to miss what I had to share about utilizing the Sigma 300 to 600 f4. Gosh, f4, that's amazing. So stick around. Let's get into this review.
My name is Alan Lacey, and I'm a wildlife filmmaker, cameraman, and producer. I've worked on shows for National Geographic, PBS Nature, Disney Plus, and the BBC. Join me as I explore the amazing world of nature and show you what it's like filming the wild.
All right, so welcome back to this review of the Sigma 300 to 600 f4. Particularly, what I focus on is filming wildlife, doing cinematography, making documentaries and such. So I wanted to be able to test this lens paired with the Sony FX6 to determine, how does it work? How does it in the field? What's the most practical uses for a 300 to 600 f4? So that's what this review is all about. I'll talk to you guys a little bit about the things I loved about this lens, things I didn't like so much about it. But all in all, I mean, it's a fantastic lens for wildlife. So just want to do a quick mention that Sigma did send me this loaner to test and review. I did not purchase it. It's not with any of my own money. I will say that after using this lens over the last 3 weeks that I'm really going to try to figure out a way to acquire this lens because it is incredible. Another quick thing is this is not a lab review. This is more like in the field testing, practical use scenarios. So I'm not really going to get into all the really critical details. There's plenty of reviews out there already that talk about the sharpness and comparisons to other lenses, etc. But for the purpose of this review, I'm going to strictly talk about how I utilize it for wildlife filmmaking, what I actually think about the lens when I've been out and testing it. So one of the most important things with wildlife is wildlife operates in the early morning and late evenings. So to film wildlife, you need to be out early mornings and late evenings to get the behavior you want to get. Most of the lens setups out there that are affordable tend to be f5.6 or greater, or f4.5 is for the 6600 that Sigma makes. So they're a little bit slower in terms, and they don't let enough light in. What Sigma did here by going to f4 and making it a constant aperture across the entire telephoto range of 300 to 600, it allows us to stay out into the field much, much longer than we would with our other systems, which is almost, it's like an essential thing for wildlife. And so one of the big, to me, takeaways of this lens of utilizing it is I was able to stay out filming an additional 20 to 30 minutes, almost up to 40 minutes after sunset, which is incredible. And then when you pair it with the FX6, the 12,800 base ISO, the second native base ISO that this camera has, it allows you to film long time into those late civil twilight hours. And for me, that's important for wildlife. There was a few times I was out filming like this coyote in the distance here on the screen, it was 20, 30 minutes after sunset, and I was able to get slow motion, properly exposed footage at that hour. And that to me, for filming wildlife, makes this lens a game changer. So there's other f6 or f4 600 lenses out there. I know Canon makes and Nikon, etc. And those are great lenses too, about the same weights. They're still pretty heavy lenses because of all the glass. But having that extra ability to go from 300 to 600 to me really, really, really makes a big difference, because I was able to zoom into 6, pull back out to 300, and get a little bit more of the landscape involved. I mean, it's not as much, but it still allows a little bit more flexibility. And for me, that was important in terms of filming a lot of the stuff that I do. Another really amazing feature about the fact that we have f4 with this lens is the incredible depth of field that you can get. You can really isolate your subjects, and this lens is phenomenal in that regards. The image quality is superb. I discovered that it's really, really, really sharp at 600 as well as 300. I found that throughout the entire focal range, at least for my purposes of filming wildlife, super sharp. And with that f4 and being able to really isolate that subject, the coyote walking through, the bats in flight that I've gotten, Those were a little further in the distance, a little easier to do in that particular instance. But I had a really awesome encounter with a rattlesnake, and you can really see that really shallow depth of field that you get at f4 and why it's so awesome to work with this lens. So for me, the image quality is actually a lot sharper to me than the 60-600 that I use, bringing in that much more light, that much more clarity. That big element in the front of this lens here, which you can see, is quite something. So it allows you to really isolate those subjects. I keep saying that because it's night and day difference than the other lenses that I've worked with, including this 60-600 that Sigma also makes, that I absolutely love, by the way. It gives you a little more wider range of ability to zoom out, zoom in as compared to this. However, this is, like I say, fast growing on me in a way that I think I'm going to be incorporating this into my kit in the future when I have the ability to pull that string on that budget. The other interesting thing is it creates really great bokeh. This lens creates, with that depth of field, when you really get that subject isolated, the bokeh in the background is really, really soothing to the eyes, which I really enjoy having that kind of quality in the cinematography that I do, because if you can get your viewers to really focus on the subject, they have that connection with it, and that beautiful soft bokeh in the background really helps pull the eyes into the subject that you're framing and telling your story about. All right, so kind of the elephant in the room. This is a big lens, and I think it comes in at like 9.3 pounds or something like that. So for my purpose of filming, you have to figure out a way to support it. So I have another video I just put out about how I set up this camera in the rig, but basically I use Condor Blue systems. You have to get a rail system, 15mm rods is what I use. I might actually consider, if I end up getting the lens going up to 19mm, create a little bit sturdier of a rig. But I use Condor Blue FX6 cage system. And I noticed in order to balance the camera properly, I had to pull it back on this sliding base plate. And in doing so, it created a lot of wobble, which I didn't really care for. Obviously, that's not ideal. And so I had to create another system by using the red Komodo base plate I have and attached it to this rig, which then locked everything down. So that allowed it to have a lot better smooth whenever I move like this. We used to kind of like do a little bit of a shake and wobble. So that's kind of the main things I've discovered with this setup. Another quick thing is it's a heavy system altogether. All put in with this whole rigged up, it's about 35.4 pounds, 35 pounds. So it's not a very quick, easy get out into the field, run and gun type of setup. It does require quite a bit of thought in terms of like how you're gonna use it, where you're gonna set it up. So that's kind of one of the big things about this is in filmmaking, especially if you're utilizing some of the bigger gear, like some of the folks that worked on like Our Planet and Planet Earth, they use a lot heavier systems. So you're kind of getting into that same class with this. Another thing with this is I have it paired up with the Sackler FSB8 fluid head on top of the Flowtech 75 system. I think for this rig, that's pushing the weight limit, because this goes up to 22 pounds roughly on this tripod, and that's a little bit above it, I think, when it's all said and done. It's actually pretty much right at 22 pounds, because then you have about 14 pounds in this tripod, so which is what gets me to the 35-pound mark. So I think ideally I'd be moving up to another size, a little beefier tripod to make this system work a little better, be a little more smoother as well. All said and done, this thing comes in at 35.4 pounds with my entire system, camera, tripod, all the accessories, lens, etc., which is heavy. And after a while of huffing around, quarter mile, half a mile to a mile, I did a couple miles one day. My shoulder really felt it at the end of the day. So one of the things, I just went on this trip this last weekend. I was looking for Mexican gray wolves. Fortunately, we didn't find any. We found a lot of sign, but I had to strip all this down and put it into my FStop Sukha 70-liter backpack. And I utilize they have these things called ICUs, which allows you to put all your camera gear into different components. I'll throw a picture up on the screen, you can see what I mean. But this setup really challenges the ability to get into the backcountry with a backpack system because it's so large. You need a large backpack. You need a large carrying capacity. So when I put it all together into my FStop Sukha gear, that all comes out to about 40 to 45 pounds. And again, taking that out is a lot of weight, which is better to have it distributed all across your body with a backpack. So much easier to get into distances that way, which we did, and didn't see anything. So I really don't have any footage to show for that, unfortunately, which I apologize about, but just that's the way wildlife is. But what I can talk about is that weight is something to consider, especially if you're going to be taking this kind of a setup deeper into the backcountry to try to film. My recommendation would be to utilize a vehicle to get as close as you can. And if you've got to like take it out, then that's when you can do it. But the whole setup does challenge that space on that backpack. I probably would need to upgrade to a different size pack, a little bit bigger, which then accommodated a little bit more. But I mean, to get something like this a couple miles out into the wilderness is quite something. All right, let's talk a little bit here about autofocus. Now in the wildlife filming, I like to use manual oftentimes because it gives me just a little more finesse and control. However, this lens does have a really incredible autofocus system. Their new, Sigma calls it the HLA focus system, which uses different actuator motors that really work in tandem with each other to create a quicker response to your focal point. So, and it also creates optical stabilization in a way too, with utilizing that same system. So there was a couple times when I was out filming some Caracara here in Arizona, southern part of the state. It was incredibly windy. We're talking 25, 30 mile an hour wind gusts. So, and I didn't have this system set up at the time the way I do now. And there was quite a lot of lens shake. When I turned on the optical stabilization, it almost took it away completely. I don't normally like to put stabilization on a lens when I also have it on a fluid head because it creates some weird like warping effect with the images. But on that particular day, it was an incredible godsend to have. And it's incredible how all that shake was eliminated. They've really nailed that optical stabilization in the system and allowed me to actually kind of salvage that shoot because most of that, if I didn't have it, would have been unusable footage. But with their optical stabilization, it completely stabilized that image and it stayed sharp throughout that entire 300 to 600 range. And I was blown away, honestly, at how well it stabilized the image and stayed on focus. So the autofocus system works really well with the FX6. You can do focus tracking, all the normal things with like the A7S III, which I also own. So I can, on my monitor here, I can actually touch screen, keep focus tracked on the little focal points. There was a couple moments with the Caracara when it was in flight that it struggled with, and I think it's more operator error because I probably wasn't tracking it as smoothly as I could have with all that wind. So it did lose focus a few times, especially as it kind of flew down low. Caracara tend to fly low through the shrub, etc., looking for prey. And so when it would fly behind bushes, it would instantly focus on the bushes in the foreground, which isn't ideal. And I know that it has the capability of keeping focus on your subject even when they move behind brush like that, because I was filming earlier with a coyote and it would walk behind brush and it kept focus on that coyote, which was really impressive. So it is possible. So I think that was more user error due to the wind, but it is what it is. It was a little bit challenging keeping the bird in flight, which you'll see the examples. You'll notice probably more user error. And while we're on the subject of autofocus and focus in general, when I am using in the manual focus mode, and again, this is a thing that I would probably, if I get this lens, would need to adjust my system, because I use these additional focus rings that I put on top of the actual focus ring itself. But the one benefit or downside of this system is it has this additional little piece right here, which I don't know if you can see. I'll try to get it to focus on this section. It raises up, so it often comes in and it stops, and then I cannot focus anymore in this direction, which is for me zooming away. And if I want to zoom in, same kind of thing. I go all the way in, and then it clicks here, and then I'm not able to focus anymore. So that's just my system. And a few times in the field where I was out trying to, like, for instance, photograph things in film, and I'm wanting to go out to meet my subject, I kept bumping into that, and then I'd have to focus or focus in all the way, and then quickly work my way back out, because this is a nonlinear focus system, and nonlinear focus systems is kind of speed reliant, so how quick you can move your focus throws, it creates a greater distance in your focus. So, and then the slower you go, the more precision you have, which is actually really nice to have on this lens, because you can really slowly get your focus in there and really dial it in, which I love. However, if you're doing really slow focus moves and then you got to move a longer distance, I found that I needed to go more than a 360-degree rotation sometimes, which then I kept bumping into that part of my focus ring, which was really challenging. So if I end up with this lens in the future, I'll be swapping that out. So if you guys use a system like this, you're going to want to take that off and either go manual with your hand or just get another system altogether that doesn't have these kind of hard stops. Also, another little quick thing about this, the lens, you know, from 300 to 600 in terms of focus. If you were at 600 millimeter and you have your critical focus and you have everything set, and then you zoom back out to 300, the focus does shift ever so slightly. And then if you punch back into 600, it does come back pretty dang close. It's almost there, I always say, in terms of staying on focus. I did discover it would lose focus here and there in terms of if you have it set and you're punching in and out. If you're coming from 600 to 300 or 300 to 600, typically if you went from 600 to 300, it would stay in focus more or less. But if you went from 300 into 600, it sometimes would change. So little downside there, it's not parfocal, I think is what the word is, where the lens stays focused no matter where you move through the focal plane or telephoto range, it'll always hold focus. Which that's where you're going to get more on your cine lens kind of setups, is more parfocal, but it's pretty close. It doesn't take much once you get from 300 and you punch into 6, just a couple quick adjustments and you're right back on focus. So it's pretty close. Another little thing that that I found challenging with the lens, but it was more operator error again, and I didn't look it up before I went out and shot, was the minimum focus distance at 600, which is I think 9.3 feet. So there was an instance where I was trying to film that rattlesnake, for example, and every time I'd get my system set up, it was kind of moving towards us. I'd get everything set up, leveled out. Takes a little bit of time to do that. And then as rattlesnake would come into view and I'd start focusing, it was getting too close, which is probably a good thing with a rattlesnake, but at 9.3 feet, there's no way it's gonna strike you. So I kept having to pick up this whole system, move it back, get it set up again, and then by the time I'd get it set up, it had continued moving in and got within that 9.3 feet again. So if I would have known that ahead of time, it probably would have been just fine. So quick trick around that, go to 300, you've got more, a little bit closer, I think it's like 6 point something. I'll throw it on the screen as far as what the minimum focus is for 300. So that's something to consider too, is 9.3 feet. Learn what that looks like, what that feels like, because that's gonna give you a better opportunity to know how to actually keep your focus at 600. I ended up getting the shot, which is really quite cool. I'll throw it up on the screen here. But that rattlesnake was quite a fun little subject to film once I figured out how to work through the 9.3 minimum focus distance at 600. All right, so kind of diving into the footage real quick here. I have a couple of these shots that I filmed, and they were at different settings using 300, 450 mil, and 600 mil at different apertures of f4, f8, and f14.
All right, so getting into it, we are here at f4, 600 millimeters, 100% scale right now. As you can see, it's pretty sharp, especially if you look into the middle, punching into 300% here. And you look how sharp it is at f4. You got some nice good bokeh in the background. Let's check the upper left corner here. Still pretty sharp. I am pretty impressed with this at 600 millimeters. At the f4, so we'll kind of just pull back out to the regular scale here. And then we're gonna jump up to f8 here at 600 millimeters coming up next. So here at f8, again, full frame, full image, really sharp. You can definitely see the difference now from f4 to f8, punching into the middle here. And again, it's really sharp. I'm just noticing across the whole range here, it's sharp all across. The upper left again, just take a look at it. I'm not noticing any chromatic aberrations at all. That's pretty impressive, actually. So at f8, it looks like it stays really sharp throughout the whole range. So let's just jump up to f14 here and let's take a look at it. Again, much more is in focus now, and it is extremely sharp. Looking at us punch into the middle again. Let's take a look at 300%. And I think at f14 at 600 mil, you're seeing everything kind of just like a lot much more in focus. In the upper left, again, no chromatic operations that I'm noticing at all. So that's quite impressive, honestly. It does appear like at f14, everything's like more in sharp, but it does seem like maybe it softens a little bit. Here we are. I have a look at f4 through the f14 range, and you can see the differences there. Quite nice. All right, let's go to 450 millimeters. f4 starting out again at the full image, and again, looks really sharp, punching into 300% in the middle of the frame. And I'm again. It looks really sharp. There's some edges. I think that it may not have been quite on focus, so that's probably on my part there. But let's look at the lower left here. And again, like the tree itself looked amazing. So the f8, again, looks really great. Much more in focus, punching into the middle. At f8, looking at those tree branches on the left side there, you can see they're in focus, as well as all those little thorns. And again, the lower left. That tree branch again in focus is quite impressive. Everything's staying pretty locked in shape. In f14, still looks really, really sharp at f14. Coming into the middle here, center frame, looking at the branches on the left there, the thicker ones, they're definitely sharp. Kind of towards the top. Let's go to the bottom left again. Let's look at the full range. That branch is still in focus. And again, I'd say the f14, it's almost like there's like a little over sharpening or something taking place. I don't have any sharpening in post, so it could just be a little bit about just the edge of the frame. Here we are at 300 millimeters, f4. Beautiful image. The whole image is just looking great. Coming in again in the middle, looking at the sharp. That branch right in the middle is nice and sharp and tack, and you get that nice, good, soft bokeh in the background. Here we are in upper left corner at 300%. Yeah, those branches in the middle right there and on the left-hand side look really sharp too. Here at f8, again, more in focus now that we're kind of stopping down to f8. In the center frame here, again, looking at those branches, the thick branches on the left, kind of in that middle one. Again, 300% looks really sharp. Upper left, again, the branch on the far left, and then those that cluster of really thick branches on the right in focus. Here at f14, now much more, obviously now we're stopped down even more, but you can see the differences in the different apertures. Center frame, I think it's possible I might have lost a little bit of focus, but that branch in the middle left there is looking pretty nice. And here we are again, looking in that cluster of branches on the right-hand side, there's sharp. The wind kind of made things a little challenging to keep things in focus, but again, we look at the different range of from f4 to f14.
So my quick review of all that little quick test of moving through the different focal ranges and different apertures, the lens holds up to me really, really well. I would say at 600 mil, things are really sharp. At 450, it seems to also be there. Actually, across the whole range, it held focus and it was really, really sharp throughout the entire focal range. At f14, I did notice that some of the sharpness almost felt like it was a little over sharp maybe, and just for the sake of testing out the clarity, it does seem like the sweet spot is more than an f8 range, maybe down to like f5, but f4 is still incredibly, incredibly sharp. And so I think generally speaking, with all of these different focal points throughout the range, really holds up well when you look at it in post and take a look at the image itself and the clarity that it provides. This lens is, the optical quality of this lens is superb.
Music bed.
This shot here is close to an hour after sunset, and I'm still able to get these mountains. Now granted, it's super dark. Would never use something like this probably, but absolutely insane. Getting back to the image quality, I really found this lens, again, superb in so many different ways. One little caveat that I'll mention and I'll throw in there is a little bit of vignetting I've discovered, especially in like high contrast situations when the sun is set and you've got that nice orange glow. Sometimes when I was working with trying to film bats, for example, I noticed the center of the frame was really bright and the edges were obviously darker. The vignetting was very apparent at that time of day. It's not terrible, however. I mean, it's definitely usable footage. It's something just to know. There is a little bit of that vignetting. All right, so let's jump real quick. My personal opinion on the pros, cons. I've already talked about it. So in a nutshell, you have your f4, the ability to create more light. It's incredible, you get good bokeh. The sharpness of this lens is incredible compared to anything I've used before. This lens really, truly stands out. The autofocus, the HLA system, both for optical stabilization as well as your autofocus system, is just on point pretty much every time. It's super quick. You can also adjust the settings on how quick it responds too, but it always nailed focus. I didn't really have any issues there whatsoever. And as far as the cons, I've already kind of touched base on those as well, but this lens is heavy. The whole system is heavy. It's also a benefit in heavier winds because it does take a little bit more to shake it, but it's a heavy, heavy system. I do not recommend carrying this and hand holding. You're not gonna have any usable footage whatsoever. If you're in still photography, you can definitely get some good shots if you're hand holding. A little bit of the vignetting that I think is potentially a con. It's really not that much of one because it's not that much in terms of the vignette itself. Manual focus system, depending on how you like to work with non-linear focus systems, to me is a pro and a con. So for me, it'd just be removing that again, like I talked about, which would be much better. But I think overall those things, and this lens comes in just under $6,000, which makes it extremely affordable as compared to other lenses that are out on the market at the same 600 focal length f4. You're not gonna find anything that comes close to the way this lens performs. And especially for that price point, it's very subjective in terms of what's affordable, etc. But for $6,000, I think it's $5,999, you can't go wrong with this lens. All right, so the big question is, should you get this lens for wildlife photography, for wildlife videography? For my purpose and sake, it's like all filmmaking. And my answer is, if you want to stay out later in the evening and film and get good quality footage of wildlife doing interesting behavioral things, this lens, you definitely need to consider it. The f4 compared with like this Sony FX6 or even a7S III or any other low light camera that has good at that, this lens will extend your shooting time and open up so much more opportunities to capture behavior. I was filming up to 40 minutes after sunset and getting incredibly good footage still. I'm just blown away. If you're a wildlife filmmaker, I would highly recommend looking into this lens. At least rent it, get it out there, test it, because I tell you what, I am sold on this lens. I can't say so much good about this. I've tested a few things from Sigma in the past, and like I say, I own their 60 to 600, which I love that lens. But the fact that this zooms from 300 to 600, it doesn't telescope, it's all internal zoom, which is a huge thing, and the f4, that extra ability to stay out later, to me is the game changer. It's the whole reason why you'd want to buy this lens. So as a wildlife filmmaker, I definitely put my name behind this lens. It's incredible. I am also part of Sigma's affiliate program. So if this lens interests you or any other Sigma lenses interest you, if you purchase through their website, Sigma, a small portion of that does go to me to help me out as well, to be able to continue doing these kinds of reviews and these talks of wildlife, producing new documentaries. So that'd be helpful. So there's a link in the description below, as well as in the comments, on how to go to Sigma to get these lenses. So again, that would mean a lot to me. Appreciate it if you do. And I think also for me, working with this lens, it brought back that joy. Not that I ever lost it really, but working with this lens, I kept having moments where I was just kind of blown away by working with it, and just coming away from the shoot just like going, wow, that was some really impressive footage. Being able to stay out later like that, something I never would have been able to do before, and just coming home smiling ear to ear after working with this lens, I think says a lot. I really think if you're, like I say, if you're a wildlife filmmaker, photographer, this should be a lens that you consider to put into your kit.
All right, thanks for sticking around and watching this full episode as I reviewed the Sigma 300-600 f4. I know it's a little bit longer than the videos that I typically do when it comes to reviews, but there was just so much to get into about this lens that I wanted to kind of do a deeper, thorough dive on the ins and outs of what I enjoyed about the lens. If you like this kind of video, I invite you to subscribe to this channel as I do more wildlife filmmaking exposés, showcasing exactly how I go about making wildlife documentaries. And also, please be sure to give this video a like, give it that thumbs up. It really helps drive the metrics of this channel to really help become a little bit better for the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you guys are interested, I do have a Patreon that you guys can subscribe to. Every little bit helps us do more of these kind of videos and create better content to showcase what it takes to make other videos about wildlife filmmaking. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.